understand, and I'm sure many of our viewers don't understand, how this could possibly happen. Where was the government?
All right, before I have Brian respond, Tim O'Brien, I know you're a reporter, so you're going to be objective about this. Does Mr. Woke have a point?
I think he does have a point. How much of a point depends on perhaps where you sit. Certainly there are some security breaches here. One of your guests pointed out that we haven't had a terrorist hijacking in 10 years, and maybe we have gotten a little lax. But we also have to recognize when people are willing to give up their lives to stage something like this, it's going to be very hard to stop under any circumstances.
And Brian, what do you make of what Arthur said? I mean, obviously, there was a failure today.
There clearly was a failure, no question about it. We have to determine what happened with regard to intelligence, what happened with regard to security. But at the same time, we have to realize that there is an ongoing war, that there's a constant flow of information, threats, warnings, information passed on by intelligence agents. And many times, by evacuating an embassy, by issuing an alert, by raising the level of security, these attacks are thwarted. Those victories are invisible because you can't count things that don't occur.
So we could have averted 14 things last month. We didn't know about it.
It is entirely possible. What we do see, and certainly saw dramatically today, are the failures. When the intelligence fails, when the security fails, that's what we were faced with today. Can we get better on security? Yes. Can we provide absolute security? Absolutely not.
Arthur, you know, as I quoted earlier, if someone wants to give up their life, that's awful hard to contain, isn't it?
Larry, I think I agree with that. I think that we are supposed to have a system in place to prevent this from happening. And you can't stop terrorism at the gate at the airport. You stop terrorists before they enter the country. You stop them by investigating their cells when they're in the country. You avoid this by exercising as much security operations as you possibly can. I'm no expert in security. I'm just a guy who saw it on CNN Live today. And all I can tell you is that there weren't supposed to be any of these in this country, and the people who are supposed to have been in charge were asleep at the switch, in my opinion.
And also, since you're an expert on pilots and things, were you surprised that whoever did this was able to commandeer these aircraft?
Not really.
To fly them?
Not really. Remember, we have no sky marshals on the aircraft, so we have no one armed on aircraft randomly to prevent this from happening. The door that separates the cockpit from the rest of the airplane is really just a symbol of security. It's not real security. And finally, it doesn't take someone who's a rocket scientist to fly an airplane once it's airborne and to fly it into a building. So you don't have to be a sophisticated pilot to accomplish this, sadly.
All right, let's do what we haven't done yet today, and since this is a special edition of Larry King Live, and we'll be doing this, of course, throughout the week and CNN 24 hours a day, let's include the audience. Knoxville, Tennessee, hello.
Yes, sir, Mr. King. I was wondering what you and the panel thought about the possibility of the United States Army shooting down the plane over Pennsylvania. I know the Pentagon has denied it, but if they knew that plane was heading for D.C., is it possible that they did? And if they didn't, would they have later if it had gotten farther?
Yeah, Tim, this is supposing. A plane's heading in. It's got passengers. It's going to go to the White House or to Camp David. Do you shoot it down?
If there's that threat, you may have to, but certainly there are steps that can be taken before that threat materializes. First, you try to make contact with that plane, find out where it's going. But if it appears headed for the White House or the Pentagon or the Capitol or Camp David, and it's off route, that may be the only alternative you have, and it would make sense.
You agree, Brian?
In some cases, yes. The reality, however, in terms of major urban areas, airports are located in urban areas. Planes take off. It's not a long flight from Dulles to the Pentagon. It's not a long flight from some of the airports in the northeastern part of the United States to New York.
How about the caller, though? You've got a plane, you know it's diverted. It's obviously not going to San Francisco.
That certainly is one of those horrible decisions that someday I suppose someone is going to have to make.
St. Louis, hello.
Hello. My question is, we seem to have become very complacent, and we're being very sophisticated and very rational about how to respond to this. However, on all of the channels, and especially on CNN, which, by the way, I think has done a fabulous job, Osama bin Laden seems to be the prime suspect here. We've heard his name for years, and he continued to operate. And my question is, he supposedly 3 weeks ago gave notice that this was going to happen. Where was everyone? Who dropped the ball? I know there's only so much you can do, and you said they might have averted 14 other incidents last month, but no one averted this incident.
Tim, was that a fact? Did we know that bin Laden had made some sort of threat 3 weeks ago?
There was knowledge that he made some kinds of threats, but they were general, and there was nothing new about that. He's making threats all the time. I think this may underscore the point made by Senator Feinstein earlier in the show that it's not just an attack or a war that we must declare on individual terrorists, but rather on terrorism itself. Wherever it exists, the United States and other countries should be working to eradicate it, root and branch, or sooner or later it may strike home, as it did today.
I agree that Osama bin Laden certainly does make threats all the time. We can shut down the country. I mean, the number of threats coming in from Osama bin Laden, not just Osama bin Laden, but other organizations against the United States, is a continuing flow of information. There probably has not been a day in the last 10 years when there were not terrorist threats made against the United States somewhere in the world.
And Larry, that's just the point, you see. That's just the point. Terrorism didn't start yesterday. It didn't start last year. In fact, we both remember for the last 30 years or 40 years we've been talking about the seriousness of terrorism. It's really about time that we get our act together so that we don't wring our hands after the terrorist act has already occurred and people have lost their lives. We're supposed to be able to prevent this stuff. You know, they call it the 21st century threat. Well, it may be the 21st century threat, but we have the 21st century capability to deal with this threat. And obviously we're not dealing with it. Are you saying,
Arthur, every flight in America should have secret people on board watching the flight, that it should be treated as El Al treats every flight?
If that's what it takes, then that's what we have to do.
Indianapolis, hello.
Good evening, Larry.
Hi.
Like many Americans, I watched in horror from work today, all day long. My question, actually the question I was asked by my 13-year-old when she got home from school, is this going to change our entire way of living? Not in the sense of being afraid, but what about fuel prices? Today I went to work, gas was $1.62. I come out of work, it's $3 and $4 a gallon.
Really?
What about our economy?
Tim, what do you think the most stark changes will be?
I'm less worried about fuel prices than civil liberties, which may be sacrificed in the aftermath of this. And that may have to be the case. A great Supreme Court justice once said the Bill of Rights is not a suicide pact. We will have to take steps to protect ourselves, and some of those steps we may find repugnant today, but they may become necessary. I think that should be of concern to everybody.
Brian?
Well, the fact is that we have found in other places where terrorist campaigns have been waged, life does go on. Nonetheless,
but it changes, doesn't it?
It does change in a way where we will see probably.
Or do we get complacent?
If nothing happens for years and years, then inevitably we will get complacent again. However, this episode, the magnitude of this, is going to leave a deep scar on the psyche of the American people. Now, that can turn into the kind of resolve, the kind of determination that the previous guests have been talking about. But it also can make us, in some cases, a more callous, harder-edged people. We are where the United States probably was on now December 8th or 9th, 1941. This generation, which felt so safe, has never experienced anything like this. This is greater probably in casualties, I suspect, than the London Blitz.
And Arthur Walk, do you now want massive lines at airports? Do you want intensive security? Do you want people to get to the airport 3 hours before a flight?
No, on the contrary. I think that the system we have in place needs to be made better. I think we need sky marshals on aircraft, but I think the people who are responsible for our security, both domestically and internationally, have to get down to work. That's really the problem.
Tim O'Brien, we began this segment, and by the way, CNN, of course, will be on top of this 24 hours a day, and we'll have more special guests tomorrow night as well here on Larry King Live. But Tim, I want to leave on Barbara. I understand Rudy Giuliani is in New York. Rudy?
It's essential, then obviously do it. The upper part of Manhattan will be open. But if tomorrow is a day in which you want to stay home and stay with your family and give comfort and support maybe to other people that have been affected by this, it would be a good day to do that. The point that Richie Shearer makes is the people are wonderful, and I mean this in the best sense of the word. We've had thousands and thousands of people that have come to help us. When I was down at the site near the World Trade Center, I met a lot of the National Guard's people that the governor has sent, really wonderful young men and women. We have enough volunteers now. We have more volunteers, frankly, than we need at this point. And what we need to do is to focus the efforts of the professionals that are there in being able to do the recovery and try to save as many lives as we can and restore services as quickly as possible. We may be asking for more volunteers tomorrow and the next day and the day after, but right now we don't need any more volunteers.
Mr. Mayor, is there still hope that there are people who are
Yes.
still alive and well?
Yes, there's hope. There's hope that there are people that are still alive.
How is the rescue effort hampered by the darkness? What do you
We moved a lot of lights in so that the area is being lit now, so that I don't think the rescue effort is going to be hampered by the darkness. The rescue effort is hampered by the fact that there's still fire there. There are still unsound structures, and it's still dangerous, although the rescue effort is now taking place. But if you're asking me, is it hampered? It's hampered because of the conditions, not because of the nighttime.
Is there a long procession of heavy bulldozers and other heavy construction equipment making its way down to lower Manhattan? What is that going to be used for?
That's going to be used to move debris out of the way so that the emergency vehicles can get in and out quickly, so that we can get the ambulances in in a more expeditious fashion than we've been able to do. And I want to thank the Deputy Mayor Rudy Washington, who has spent most of the day coordinating, getting all of that emergency equipment in the right place, ready to move. If you go along Houston Street, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of pieces of equipment that are lined up to move in and to take debris out. And now they've started doing that. And I think that's probably what you observed. You probably observed them starting the.
Are you concerned about the city tonight in light of all of the things that have happened during the daylight hours today?
Am I concerned from the point of view of the actions and activities of the people of the city? The police department is out in large numbers. You want to explain the force that you have out there? And no, I'm not concerned. But
we're pretty much out in full force this evening. Southern Manhattan, as you know, we're primarily concentrating on the rescue efforts. The rest of the city is basically, some of the entry points are shut down. The tunnels are shut down. As of midnight, there will be no more traffic coming into Southern Manhattan from 14th Street. We're going to shut that down. I think the city's pretty secure, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing in the rescue effort, and just hope for the best.
Have there been any reports of lawlessness, any reports of any looting or anything?
Absolutely not. There's been no reports of looting or any other problems out of the ordinary. And as I said, the boroughs are working pretty normally, and so far so good.
Mayor, did you see the president's comments tonight, and have you spoken to him again since?
No, I spoke to him earlier today, and I only heard the very end of his comments because I was coming back from the World Trade Center.
He said thousands to die.
I don't know the number at this point. That may be very well be the case. At this point, we're still in the effort of trying to recover people. I don't know the numbers yet, but I mean, this is going to be, as I said, the numbers are going to be very, very high.
Mr. Mayor,
just if you think of the number of people that were in the building at the time, we've been spending time with the medical examiner, who, by the way, was injured himself, and so Dr. Hirsch was injured and had to be treated, but he's organized his office, and they are ready to deal with thousands and thousands of bodies if they have to.
Mr. Mayor, earlier in the day,
and we'll give them the support and the help to do that. He was down there, yes, and he got injured. I mean, he's okay, but obviously he was hurt. I mean, he was beaten up pretty badly. His body hurts, and
He was
he's
beaten up?
well. No, I mean his body was. He got hit with debris. No one beat him up. He got hit. He described it that way. I said, "How do you feel, Dr. Hurd?" He said, "I got pretty beaten up." And then what happened is he got hit with debris.
Mr. Mayor, earlier in the day, you weren't sure exactly what the radius of damage was like, what blocks were involved, how much debris had fallen on surrounding areas.
If you go down there now, the last time I saw it was when I was leaving this morning. It's horrendous. I mean, it's filled with debris. It's filled with dust. It's going to be a heck of a cleanup effort.
How far down? Battery Park City, was that affected?
Well, the power is out in the lower part of Manhattan on the west side. So there is no power at this point. So that's why we had to bring in the lights to light up the area so that they can do the rescue effort. And the people that live at Battery Park City have been evacuated. They were taken to New Jersey. So I don't know when that'll be back. That's going to take a while for that to come.
What about other South Street Seaport?
So on the east side of downtown Manhattan has power, and exactly where the demarcation line is, I'm not sure. But over by One Police Plaza, going east, there's power, and I believe there's power at City Hall now.
What are your plans for the rest of the night, for the next 12 hours? And
My
for your staff? And will you all still be?
We just had a long meeting with all of the agencies to make sure they have the support that they need. They'll all reassemble here at 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and some of the critical people will stay here throughout the night, and we'll have representatives here, and I'll be here for a while longer.
Mr. Mayor, are you concerned about asbestos contamination?
The health department has done tests, and at this point is not concerned. But so far, all the tests that we've done do not show an undue amount of asbestos. Doesn't show any particular chemical agent that we have to be concerned about. The accumulation of it for people who are down there can become very, very irritating. And there were a lot of people whose eyes have been burned, but I don't think there's any chemical agent that we have to worry about at this point.
Do you have any idea how many police officers and firefighters you are missing?
Yes, we have an idea of how many we're missing.
Can you tell us that?
Well, it's a lot. It's a lot. A lot of firefighters and a lot of police officers, and I don't know that. I really don't want to get into a numbers game until we know. It's a lot. It's a lot.
There are also reports that there are some top brass in both departments who are missing.
Yes, we lost the deputy chief of the fire department and the chief of the department.
The chief of the fire department?
The chief of the fire department. The first deputy commissioner. Feehan. Deputy Commissioner Feehan, Chief Gansey, Father Judge, and Ray Downey, who I just gave a party for at Gracie Mansion for his years of service to the fire department, who led our team in the Oklahoma City bombing rescue. We've also lost him.
This must be very difficult for you, Mr. Mayor.
It's very difficult, not just for me, for the fire commissioner, and there are some other very close friends that are missing right now.
Have you had to speak to their families?
I haven't been able to speak to their families yet.
Mr. Mayor, advice again to New Yorkers who are still concerned about going to work and things like that.
The very best thing would be to stay home tomorrow. If you have to come to work, and you work north of 14th Street, then you can come to work if it's critical. So if it's important and it's critical, then you come to work. But if you can stay home tomorrow, you're going to make things easier on yourself and easier on the city if you stay home. So the city is not officially closed. Manhattan is not officially closed north of 14th Street. But we're advising people if you can stay home, it would be better. Outside of Manhattan, you go to work and do all the things you would normally do. There's no particular reason to be constricted in activities there. But if you can stay out of the city, that would be good.
Any idea when the airports will reopen?
I believe not before 2 o'clock tomorrow, but that was the report we had a while earlier. So at least closed until then.
Mr. Mayor, Arab Americans for Peace issued a statement condemning the attack and asking for Americans and New Yorkers to withhold judgment until after an investigation has been completed. But they're also concerned about the fact that Muslim communities here in New York will be targeted for harassment both by law enforcement officials and by community members because of the nature of the attack.
Just the opposite. They will receive extra protection. That's the point of what I was saying earlier. Nobody should engage in group blame. The reality is, whoever is responsible for this, law enforcement will figure that out. The United States government will figure it out, and the retaliation will be, I'm sure, very, very strong, and make an example out of those people. But nobody should try to make that determination on their own. Nobody should blame any group of people or any nationality or any ethnic group. The particular individual is responsible and the group's responsible. That's up to law enforcement, and it's up to the United States government to figure out. And citizens of New York should, even if they have anger, which is understandable, and very, very strong emotions about this, it isn't their place to get involved in this. Then they're just participating in the kind of activity we just witnessed. And New Yorkers are not like that. So we're sensitive to that. The police department will have special patrols in those areas of the city, and anybody that tries to do anything like that will be arrested.
Mr. Mayor, is there anything you could say to put to rest some of the fears people have?
Everything is being done to try to make the city as secure as possible. The president, the FBI, the federal government, the state, the governor, the New York City Police Department, law enforcement authorities, everything is being done that can be done. And people tonight should say a prayer for the people that we've lost, and be grateful that we're all here. And tomorrow, New York is going to be here, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than we were before.
Last question. Police Commissioner Carrick, did you lose any top people in your department?
No, not to my knowledge, not at this point. We have suffered losses. There was a contingent of cops that was with the mayor and I, and Chief Ganji and First Deputy Meehan. The mayor and I left them. We were gone about 10 minutes when that portion of the building fell, and I had a number of people there. We haven't found them yet, so I don't know the numbers. I don't know yet.
We're still hopeful that we're gonna find people,
and
we have not given up hope that we're gonna be able to find some people.
We do know there are people in the building that are alive. We know that for a fact.
How do you know?
I can't get into it right now, but we do know there are people in the building that are alive, and we're making every effort to get to them.
Are those members of those police officers, Commissioner?
Excuse me?
Are those police officers?
There are some police officers, yes.
How many?
Which building are they in?
2 that we know of.
How many? 2?
2.
Do you know which building they're in?
Which building?
I can't say right now.
Have police officers been pulled from the rubble already, alive?
Yes, there are a number of people that were taken to the hospitals.
Can people be heard from
Yes.
inside the rubble? Is that how you know? Can people be heard?
I can't get into it right now.
We have a group of shelters that are available in Manhattan. Bayard Rustin High School, Seward Park High School, Washington Irving High School, the High School of Fashion Industry, Chelsea High School, Norman Thomas, the City School, JS 22, IS 131, Comprehensive Day and Night. They're all open for people that may need shelter tonight. And we'll put out this list, as well as Curtis High School in Staten Island and Westinghouse High School in Brooklyn. So we'll put out this list, and these shelters are all available to people who may be displaced. Thank you.
That was Mayor Rudy Giuliani in a late evening press conference in New York discussing the events of the day and the precautions taken by the city. This is the end of Larry King Live, but I did want to say a word and hold Tim O'Brien over too about Barbara Olson. Barbara appeared on this show many times, as you know. Sometimes her opinions could be infuriating, but you could not love her. you could not love her. She was just, Barbara was a doll. Would you agree, Tim? Is Tim O'Brien there? Wouldn't you agree that she was a special lady? Oh, I'm sorry, Tim is not there. I thought he had stayed over. Anyway, she was a special lady. We will all miss her. I can't imagine doing one of our panel debates and not having Barbara Olson. And to her wonderful husband, Ted, the condolences of all of us here at CNN. We'll be back tomorrow night. Stay tuned for a CNN special report, America Under Attack.
Now, a CNN special report, America Under Attack. Here's Paula Zahn in New York, Wolf Blitzer in Washington, and Bill Hemmer in Atlanta.
Good evening, everyone. You've heard some of our leaders calling today one of the worst days in American history. You are joining us now some 13 hours after two hijacked commercial airlines crashed into the World Trade Center, taking down the North Tower, taking down the South Tower, as well as an adjoining building. Some 50,000 people worked in this complex. As I look behind me tonight, a disturbing sight. And after we look at this shot, we will try to fast forward to this evening. No trace of what used to be the tallest buildings in New York City, just a smoldering black hole. The Empire State Building, now the tallest building in the city. The strikes happened 18 minutes apart, the first one at 8:45. By 10:30, both towers had collapsed. An untold number of victims are still trapped inside the wreckage of the building. Mayor Giuliani and the police chief confirming they believe there are people who are still alive. Unfortunately, rescue workers cannot get to them at this hour because of falling debris, because of smoke, and because of structures of buildings that might continue to collapse. Mayor Giuliani said the death toll could be horrendous. He said the numbers are going to be very, very high. What we can tell you tonight is the city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed to be dead. The police chief saying among the dead, the chief of the fire department as well as the deputy chief, some 85 police officers missing tonight. CNN's Peter Viles takes us back to the start of this dreadful day. I need to warn you, the pictures are graphic. Some of you might find them disturbing.
Just before 9 a.m. Eastern, Americans awakened to shocking pictures from New York.
I just saw the entire top part of the World Trade Center explode.
Minutes earlier at 8:45, a hijacked plane had slammed into one of the World Trade Center towers. 9:03 a.m., a sickening sight. Oh my God! A second plane crashes into the Trade Center.
See the damage to that about the middle of the building. Just incredible what we are witnessing here.
People on the ground look on in horror as workers in the Trade Center towers fall, or maybe even jump to their deaths. 9:30 a.m., the president in Florida.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The airport's being evacuated. They need to go home.
9:40, all American airports have been closed, but there are still planes in the sky. And minutes later, one of them crashes into the Pentagon.
Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal.
9:59, as the Pentagon burns, the South Tower of the World Trade Center buckles and collapses. 10:29, the second Trade Center tower collapses. An American landmark is in ruins.
Here it comes. I'm getting behind the car.
Thousands feared dead, lower Manhattan shrouded in smoke and debris. 10:48, police in western Pennsylvania confirmed that a fourth hijacked plane crashed a half hour earlier outside Pittsburgh.
Enormous loss of life there.
Noon, shock and disbelief As the dead and wounded are taken to East Coast hospitals, officials in New York and Washington report a shortage of blood and appeal to Americans to donate their blood. Late afternoon, New Yorkers are evacuating Lower Manhattan by the thousands. Parts of the city unrecognizable. A third building at the Trade Center, this one 47 stories, collapses. At Bellevue Hospital, an official says, quote, "It is a catastrophe of unparalleled proportions." Peter Weil, CNN, New York.
And if you were with us through Mayor Giuliani's news conference, you can see how tough it is for anybody to sort out the magnitude of what this city endured as well as what Washington endured today. I was on the phone earlier with a city official who believes the death toll will go into the thousands. Once again, that is impossible to even get a sense of the number of injuries and the number of deaths because of the fact that rescuers simply cannot get in to that perimeter area surrounding the World Trade Center because of fears of further structural collapse. I wanted to let you know what we can also tell you New Yorkers can expect in the morning. The city from 14th Street down will be closed off to civilians at least until Thursday. All New York City public schools, parochial schools, and private schools will be closed tomorrow. All, as I mentioned, all businesses below 14th Street will be closed as well. The nation's airports have been completely shut down at least until noon Eastern on Wednesday. The stock markets, as you can see on the screen, will also be closed. And you know that the news from the Asian markets that are now opening is not good, opening to a 17-year low. But once again, New Yorkers are going to wake up to a skyscape they barely recognized. The two towering World Trade Towers no longer exist. And Wolf, throughout the next hour, we will hope to be bringing you more information from some of the trauma centers in the area that are trying to treat patients. We know for a fact some 300 victims are being treated at St. Vincent's Hospital, and we're going to go to our reporter live there to get a better sense of what their condition is at the moment.
Paula, President Bush was very succinct in his remarks tonight, insisting, quote, "Today our nation saw evil," confirming the worst fears when he said this: thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. He began this day on a routine assignment in Florida, promoting his education agenda when he got the word of the plane crash, the plane attack on the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan. He was immediately flown shortly thereafter to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana for security considerations. His security personnel not believing it was safe yet to return to Washington. From Barksdale, he was flown to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, home of the Strategic Command, where he remained for several hours, participated in a telephone conference call with his national security advisors. Eventually, it was determined that it was safe for him to return to Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington. He came in under unprecedented escort protection from F-15s and F-16s, eventually landing at Air Force Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington. We're taking a look at some of those escorts that accompanied Air Force One on the way to back to Washington. And once he landed at Andrews, he was flown by Marine One, the Marine helicopter, to the south lawn of the White House. Once again, almost unprecedented decoy helicopters, Marine helicopters, joining him in order to get to the White House. The President spoke for just under 5 minutes, and he spoke from the heart.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. but they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
President Bush speaking at the White House almost 2 hours ago from the Oval Office, his first nationally televised Oval Office address. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, is at the White House. John, from that address, the president met with his top national security advisors. What do we know about that meeting?
That's right, Wolf. The president immediately proceeded to that meeting at the White House Situation Room. It lasted a little under an hour, we are told. On the national security side, the president was brought up to speed on U.S. military deployments around the world, including the status of U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf region, as well as the deployment today of naval vessels from Norfolk, Virginia, up along the eastern seaboard of the United States. Also, that meeting was expanded beyond the normal national security meeting in a way to take into account the devastating effect of this tragedy. The Transportation Secretary, the Health and Human Services Secretary, and the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency brought into that meeting as well to discuss with the President and his national security team the steps the federal government is taking to try to deal with the devastation of this. Now, we are told from sources earlier today that senior administration officials told key members of Congress that they are, quote, certain, based on the evidence they have gathered so far, confident based on the evidence gathered so far that people and organizations associated with Osama bin Laden are responsible for this. But coming out of the national security meeting tonight, I was told by a senior administration official they do not want to jump to conclusions here. The administration will say nothing publicly about that. This official saying, quote, we're going to take a little time to sort this out. So the president being briefed by his team, he is here at the White House tonight. That meeting is now over, but look for the president tomorrow to have more public events. The goal here is to send reassuring signals to the American people. We are told the first order of business tomorrow is a bipartisan meeting with the congressional leadership here at the White House. Wolf.
And John, the president was also sending a very powerful signal to the enemies of the United States when he said this. Let me read this line from his speech. He said, "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them," which suggests that some states may eventually be paying a price if the U.S. concludes that they were responsible as well.
It certainly does. The president's very strong words there come at a time this administration, and especially the prior administration, had been criticized for some by not taking stronger actions against the governments that have provided safe harbor and financial support to Osama bin Laden. Again, the administration publicly not assigning any blame, but we do know from the intelligence briefings provided to key members of Congress that is the administration's, at least the preliminary conclusion. Again, 3 sources I spoke to on Capitol Hill say administration officials used the word confident that the evidence they were gathering so far pointed to the bin Laden organization. Wolf.
All right, John King, stand by at the White House. I want to bring in our military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. He's at the Pentagon, which saw devastation there as well. Jamie, first of all, what do we know about the casualty count at the Pentagon?
Well, Wolf, just a short time ago, we got the first estimate of how high the death toll may be here at the Pentagon. It could be as many as 800 people killed, according to Arlington County fire officials, who say they've been told by Pentagon officials that the range of missing persons here is somewhere between 100 and 800. So that's the range that the death toll could take here at the Pentagon. Arlington County fire officials also say that the work tonight, as the fires continue to burn here at the Pentagon, is to remove some of the debris, take some of the front of the facade off so that firefighters can go in the morning in full force and try to put out what remains of the fires that, as I said, are still burning here more than 13 hours after the crash took place. Now, in addition, Pentagon officials insist that they're going to have the building open in the morning, at least large portions of the building on the other side that were not affected by this incident, as a symbol that the fact that the U.S. military headquarters has not been shut down by this terrorist action. Wolf?
And Jamie, just to remind our viewers, about 20,000 people on a daily basis go to work at the Pentagon, which is, of course, just outside of Washington. It was the Army section of the Pentagon that took the brunt of this attack, wasn't it?
Well, actually, it hit at the 4th corridor, if you're familiar with the Pentagon from your Pentagon days, in an area that had just been renovated. That actually is an area where there are a lot of Navy offices. There were also a lot of Army offices along this side of the Pentagon over here that was also affected by the blaze. A couple of interesting notes. One is that this marks a dividing line between where the Pentagon was just completed being renovated and another area that they were just about to start on. That meant that there were fewer people in both of those sections. In one case, because some people had not yet moved into new offices. In other case, because they had just moved out of old offices. And in the new area, which is on this side and didn't burn as much, some of the new improved fire security systems helped a lot, including a sprinkler system that was installed on one side of the Pentagon, had not been installed on the other. That was a big help in keeping the fire down.
And Jamie, while we have you, what have you been hearing about troop deployments by the military in the aftermath of this attack?
Well, I've only heard of one significant move so far, and that is the decision to hold the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf region. The Enterprise had just been relieved by the Carl Vinson in the Persian Gulf and was on its way home. Pentagon sources tell me that orders have been sent to the ship to hold up, to stay in the area of the Arabian Sea and await further orders, a signal that the United States may have something in mind in terms of some sort of a military reaction. Wolf?
Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. All right, please stand by. I want to go down to Bill Hemmer in Atlanta. He has more on this devastating day. Bill?
Yeah, Wolf, thank you. On a normal day, and underscore the word normal because we are far from that at this point. On a normal day, any airline that will go down the U.S. would be given what we would consider wall-to-wall coverage. But today in western Pennsylvania, just another element, another aspect of this still unfolding tragic story. To David Mattingly near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where United Airlines Flight 93 went down this morning about 10:20 a.m. David, good evening again to you.
Good evening, Bill. We are officially in the tiny town of Stony Creek Township, Pennsylvania. That's just outside Shanksville, southeast of Pittsburgh. The FBI here at the crash scene will confirm only one thing, that there were 38 passengers and 7 crewmen aboard the United 757 when it crashed here in a field of an old strip mining area. Officials at this location have been reluctant to call it an act of terrorism until evidence is uncovered that actually indicates this. In the meantime, there are hundreds of state troopers and emergency personnel securing the crash site, calling it a crime scene in preparation of a federal investigation. Now, witnesses in the area said the plane hit the ground at a 45-degree angle, causing a tremendous explosion, rattling windows miles away from here. All that's left of the 757 appears to be small pieces of debris, raising concerns that the investigation here on the ground could be a long and difficult one. Of course, the search is on for the all-important black box, the flight recorder. There is also a great deal of interest in what could be another key piece of evidence if it proves to be authentic. A 911 call originating from the plane and taken by a 911 operator in a Pennsylvania county just west of here. That tape is now in the hands of the FBI. If it proves to be authentic, it could be the lone surviving voice of an eyewitness on board that ill-fated aircraft. And with it, maybe some answers about what happened on board the airplane, and maybe some answers as to why this plane crashed here in this field instead of into another terrorist target. Now, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge surveyed the area earlier today, calling on Pennsylvanians to offer prayer and cooperation. As night fell, we began to see trucks coming by with trailers loaded with equipment that looked like communications equipment and lighting equipment, obviously preparing for a lengthy investigation here. Bill.
All right, David, thank you. David Mattingly in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Throughout the evening here, the human face has been put on this tragedy in more ways than one. We're starting to get an idea of some of the people who were on board the various flights that took off today, a partial list of some of the better recognized names on board. David Angel and his wife Lynn from Pasadena, California. The executive producer of NBC's Frasier, Wings, and Cheers was on board one of those planes. Daniel Lewin, 31 years old, co-founder of Akamai Technologies. Garnett Bailey, his friends called him Ace, director of scouting for the LA Kings, the National Hockey League. Also Mark Bavis, also a scout with the LA Kings, and throughout the night you've heard the name Barbara Olson being mentioned several times, a frequent contributor to Larry King Live and CNN through her legal commentary. Outside of that, we're also starting to pick up different stories across the country, repercussions from this story, indication that some gas lines in different parts of the country are snaking more than an hour or more in length. Also an indication that some people are afraid of a supply disruption. Nothing confirmed on a disruption of supply, but as a result, some gas stations in Dallas, Texas, $5 a gallon. Indianapolis, $5 a gallon. Parts of Ohio, also $5 a gallon for gasoline at this point. Here in the state of Georgia, getting reports at various grocery stores and supermarkets that people flock to the groceries today, stocking up on water and canned goods. We don't say this out of fear or try to incite some sort of fear or worry or concern. It's just the reports we're getting from people and the way they are reacting to what we have seen now for the past 13 and a half hours, originating this morning about 9 a.m. Eastern Time in New York City. Speaking of New York, back to Manhattan and Paula Zahn. Paula.
Thanks, Bill. I think people here are just beginning to grasp the sheer horror and tragedy of the multiple attacks on this city today. Once again, the first hijacked jet is slamming into the World Trade Center about 8:45, the second attack about 18 minutes later. And one of the more chilling developments tonight, both the mayor of New York City and the police chief confirming they have reason to believe the people are still alive and trapped inside the wreckage of the 2 collapsed towers, as well as an adjoining building, Building 7, that made up a part of that World Trade complex. The Firefighters Union confirming tonight that 265 firefighters presumed dead. The police chief confirming tonight that the city of New York lost its fire chief as well as its deputy fire chief, some 85 New York police officers missing, Some presume them to be dead. We know that in area hospitals, according to the mayor, some 600 patients or victims are now being treated. Part of the challenge in getting to what the mayor believes to be potential victims who may still be alive is the fact that there is a tremendous amount of smoke still billowing from the collapsed towers. There is still so much structural damage. They're fearful that rescuers could go in there and get injured again, as well as the fumes. It is not clear when any rescuers will be allowed to penetrate this perimeter area. The mayor confirming tonight that the fatalities will be horrendous. The numbers, he told us, will be, quote, very, very high. Right now, we are going to listen to Maria Hinojosa's report, who will give you a perspective on exactly what happened after these initial attacks and how New Yorkers reacted to them.
At ground zero, running in the streets is the only form of escape. But on those same streets, the chaos and vibrations couldn't be avoided. Further north, New Yorkers gathered at Times Square. In humble silence and disbelief, everyone looking up to the big screen. Downtown, the mass exodus began.
I saw everybody crying in the streets, saying their prayers and crying. I saw different races, nationalities, and creeds that usually have differences with one another come together and bond and love and respect.
Along Fifth Avenue, people flooded to the streets to watch together.
Oh my God, it's inside the first building.
The faces of New Yorkers, solemn, quiet, praying. A father trying to give security to the innocent ones. The tiniest of faces, protected. Streets filled with anger and shock.
I have never witnessed nothing like this in my entire life. Human beings, parents, daughters and sons jumping out of the window at least from 80-something floors. None of you want to witness that. I'm traumatized for life.
The street where now everyone shares the pain out in the open without shame. The street where office chairs have become eerie stretchers outside a hospital.
We've had multiple types of injuries, from severe burns to blunt injuries and multiple fractures.
The street where a depleted mayor summons some strength.
New York City is a lot stronger than this, and we're going to overcome it, and the people of New York City are going to give an example of how you stand up to terrorism. You just don't be afraid.
But Times Square is empty, the streets are silent, and a city mourns. Maria Hinojosa, CNN, New York.
And I think it is fair to say millions of people were in a state of shock today based on the conversations I've had with people who witnessed this attack. That state of shock is turning to outrage. Joining me right now is Scott Hess and Jennifer Ruth, both of whom were working in the area at the time. I should make it clear before we go any further, some 50,000 people worked in the World Trade Center area. You were not far from there. Both of you were evacuated from your workplaces. What did you see, Jennifer?
I work at the Three World Financial Center on the 35th floor, and my cubicle faces the World Trade Center, and we saw the hind end of something entering the building and the gaping hole through the building, and then the debris starting to fall. So we then evacuated and crossed the street and saw the second plane before it actually hit the building. And at that point, everyone panicked and screamed and started running north on West Side Highway.
Now, at that point, police obviously had not blocked off streets, so you were able to run as fast as you could.
Right.
What do you remember about what you saw earlier today?
After we evacuated the building, the first tower was on fire, and we saw bodies either leaping or falling from the upper floors, and it was just a chilling scene. And a few minutes later, almost in a very surreal action, the second plane, and I could almost see that it was a United plane, I thought, just
that
smashed.
Actually has been confirmed this evening.
It smashed right into the building, and people were just screaming and crying, and it was just, the fire just, started to explode.
Some of the police officials have said tonight that they were surprised about how orderly the evacuations were, not only from your two buildings, you'd expect those to be more orderly than those of the World Trade Center bombings, but that isn't exactly what you experienced on the street.
There was a little more panic on the street. For the most part, things were fairly organized once we got up to the West Side Highway, but there was just people grieving and crying, and some of the schools were being evacuated. There's a bit of panic there, but overall, I think people just needed to get north and just get out of the area.
You saw, as you said, the first attack. You also saw the second plane slam into the South Tower. You heard the mayor tonight say that they have reason to believe that people are still alive in that wreckage. Are either one of you that optimistic based on what you saw? You were very close.
It was very close, but I couldn't see. I left before I was able to escape the scene before the buildings actually fell. And so I don't know what it looked like after that point. People were still evacuating and had the opportunity to get out as I was getting out. So
most companies are advising people not to go to work tomorrow. All the public schools, private schools, parochial schools will be closed. As you wake up tomorrow morning, I'm sure you have no sense of what that day will be like that awaits you. But give us a preview of what you think it might be like.
Yeah, I mean, just walking down to getting off the subway and looking at the World Trade Center for basically the last 18 or 19 years, every day, it's just not there anymore. And walking up the West Side Highway, just turning around on a continuous basis, they were just not there anymore. And just seeing this bellowing smoke.
It is so eerie out there right now, and one of the things that I was impressed by today is there was a plea made for people to donate blood. And I went late this morning to donate blood, and the lines were wrapped around the block. And I'm told at some hospitals there were 4- and 5-hour waits to donate blood. This does not surprise you, does it?
No, not at all. I mean, everyone has been so affected by this just immediately on the streets. As soon as I got home after the incident, everyone was glum and quiet on the streets. People stayed outside to see if they could get a view, but it was just complete quiet.
Well, Jennifer and Steve, we appreciate your dropping by. We know that not only has this been a very traumatic day for you, but as Senator Warner said earlier today, one of the worst days in American history. You're very lucky to be alive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, we're going to check in with Rose Arce, who is one of our producers who has basically been at Ground Zero most of the day. We find her right now at St. Vincent's Hospital, where several hundred people are being treated right now. Rose, give us an update if you would.
Yes, Paula, I'm actually right here on 8th Avenue, and right over my left shoulder, you would see the Twin Towers on any other night clearly, but tonight there's nothing. It's completely dark. I spent most of the day about 2 blocks from there on the top floor of a building that's just north of the World Trade Center. From there we could see people rushing to the windows as fire was billowing out of the top of the building where the first airplane hit. People were rushing to the windows. They were taking clothes. One thing looked like a blanket that they were waving. And then suddenly there was an explosion, and you saw folks start to jump out the front window of the building and plunge. I saw at least 6 people do this. Folks were pushing each other. Some people were screaming for help and then just falling out. There was chaos on the ground. You could see emergency workers rushing to the scene of the building. Right now it's pretty quiet behind me, but this is an emergency route right over here, 8th Avenue. It's a straight shot from the World Trade Center uptown, and we've been watching emergency vehicles rushing right by us into the hospital that's right up the street.
Rose, I want to make a clarification now. The police chief earlier reported that they believe there were people alive, and most people interpreted that as alive in the wreckage of the World Trade Center. The police commissioner is issuing clarifications that says they believe there are people alive in nearby buildings downtown, not the Trade Center. Once again, neither officials at the Pentagon or officials here in the city can confirm the magnitude of the tragedy witnessed here in New York City and in Washington today, but once again the mayor says the statistics will be horrendous and the number of deaths will be very, very high. It's time to go back to Washington now, and Wolf.
Thank you, Paula. We're getting some new information now from our Susan Candiotti in Miami. She's reporting that the FBI has begun the process, or will soon begin the process, of executing search warrants in more than one location in South Florida, including what she says are the homes and post office boxes of several individuals. This is in response, Susan Candiotti is reporting, to information gleaned from the investigation into today's terrorist attacks in New York and here in Washington. One source tells Susan this: we're looking at South Florida ties to some of the people we're looking at. That's because, she says, authorities are basing their investigation on the passenger manifests of these hijacked airliners, 4 of them today, and they're taking information from other sources as well. We'll be following this. One additional note, She says a search will also be done in Daytona, Florida. Susan Candiotti will be joining us shortly. I do want to report once again what she's saying, that the FBI has begun the process of search warrants in South Florida as well as Daytona. Susan is now on the phone with us. Susan, tell us, give us a perspective. What exactly do you know is going on?
It's my understanding, according to a law enforcement source, Wolf, that the FBI is in the process of executing search warrants. That is to say, in the process of putting the paperwork together. The execution of them may not begin until the morning or early morning hours. What they are going to be executing these search warrants are homes, as well as some may only be post office boxes, I am told. They are basing the information on the request for a search warrant on information coming from passenger manifests of the aircraft involved, among other information they have by talking to various other sources. I am told, quote, we are looking at South Florida ties to some of the people that we're looking at. When I asked if they are looking at names on the manifest that may only turn out to be passengers, I was told, no, we are basing our search warrants on more information than that. They are looking at more than one location, I am told, in South Florida, as well as other locations in Central and or North Florida, including Daytona Beach. Wolf?
Susan Candiotti in Miami, thank you very much. And our Jonathan Karl, our congressional correspondent, has been talking with members of Congress who also have been receiving intelligence briefings. John, tell us what you're hearing now.
Well, Wolf, I'm outside the Capitol Police headquarters here on Capitol Hill, where Attorney General and also the FBI director have both been briefing about 75 members of Congress. I can tell you that in general, the one bit of information here is that they believe, according to the Attorney General told members of Congress that these were teams of 3 to 5 operating on each one of these planes, and that they believe that in each one of the cases where they have direct information, they were armed only with knives. Besides that, members of Congress I've spoken to that were in this briefing expressing frustration at the lack of information. They wanted to know, about the plane that went down outside of Pittsburgh. They wanted to know where was that plane's destination. They wanted to know more about the nationalities of those that were involved with this attack. And they said they got essentially no new information on any of that. But again, the one thing that they did get out of this was that, according to the Attorney General, what the Attorney General told the members of Congress here, those were teams of 3 to 5 operating on each one of those planes. Now, there will be another extraordinary briefing of law enforcement officials tomorrow at 12:30 on the floor of the House of Representatives, because every member of the House and Senate, for that matter, obviously wants to get briefed, wants to get these questions answered. So there will be a closed briefing on the floor of the House, we are told, tomorrow at 12:30 with law enforcement officials.
Jonathan Karl, so many questions and still so few answers. Thanks so much for joining us. And I want to bring in now the former UN ambassador, United States ambassador to the United Nations and Energy Secretary during the Clinton administration, Bill Richardson, who was one of the last high-ranking U.S. officials to actually go to Afghanistan and meet with Taliban leaders. He met with them in late 1997. And also Julie Surs, a former U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, a specialist on the Taliban and Afghanistan and Osama bin Laden. And first to you, Secretary Richardson, what is your sense right now, knowing the Taliban, knowing Osama bin Laden, hearing these reports, what do you believe that Osama bin Laden was responsible for this?
My gut feeling, Wolf, is yes, that every indicator, which is similar to the bombing of our 2 embassies, to the USS Cole, the modus operandi, the 3 to 5, that most likely it is Osama bin Laden. I believe that intelligence is also indicating that he's now in Afghanistan. If that is the case, I think this new policy makes sense, and that is that any nation that harbors such a terrorist would also be the beneficiary of a retaliatory effort by the United States. My view, again, is that the Taliban have been playing this game, that we contain him. When I met with them, they said he's not perpetrating any terrorist acts, he's under our control. That is not the case. He operates in a wide network throughout Afghanistan, other countries. I think it is critically important that if he is in Afghanistan, that he be turned over, that he be brought to a swift retaliatory effort.
Julie Sirs, you're a former DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency analyst specializing in Afghanistan and the Taliban and Osama bin Laden. What's your take?
I agree with Ambassador Richardson and the other experts that I know you've had on throughout the day that, yes, all the indicators do seem to point to Osama bin Laden being responsible for this attack. And yes, I also agree with Ambassador Richardson that the Taliban, and as the President said, share at least equal responsibility in this act if that does turn out to be the case that bin Laden is behind it. Taliban officials have claimed after the 1998 embassy bombings, after the Cole attack, that bin Laden could somehow be controlled by them, and I think this shows, if anything, that they're working with him, that they're cooperating with him, that's perhaps even the best way to understand bin Laden's organization, that it includes not just bin Laden and this extremist network worldwide, but is very much helped by the safe haven the Taliban provide, and even by the assistance of some neighboring countries, including particularly Pakistan. I think it needs to be said now. It's something many of us American officials have believed, and private experts on the subject as well.
Well, let me ask Ambassador Richardson, do you believe Pakistan should share some of the responsibility if, in fact, Osama bin Laden is proven to have been responsible for these attacks?
Yes, there's no question that the Pakistanis have a lot of influence on the Taliban. When I visited the Taliban, it was arranged by the Pakistanis, who had to have a lot of leverage over them, territorial, financial. I think it's important that the international community rally behind the United States. NATO, nations like Pakistan, others that have influence with the Taliban in Central Asia. This should be an international responsibility. This is an attack on the international community, not just the United States. The United Nations needs to be involved. We need to have a multinational effort.